news. The Southern Army of Lord Cornwallis was making his way through the hills of North Carolina and came close to the Watauga province. And so Samuel Doak and a number of the other Presbyterian Hearties gathered themselves together and they sang that old song. Throughout the war between the states, those of Celtic origin and many who simply caught on both sides of the Great Divide shouted out King Alfred's war song at one another across the divide that sundered brothers and split loyalties in households and in states. And all the way to the present, those words continue to ring out. Now, I've often wondered, what is the great appeal? Why is it that Celtic traditions become our dearest traditions at Christmas time? The Christmas tree, for instance, the Yule log, holly and ivy. These all came to us from Boniface, Celtic missionary to the Germanic peoples. Now, during that great scene when Boniface and his men are warned that a Druidic rite is about to sacrifice the life of a young virgin on a high hillside in a sacred grove. And Boniface and his fellow missionaries rush out of their camp to go and discover where this wicked and perverse rite will be held. They burst into a circle of Druidic worshipers just as the sacrifice was about to come to a conclusion. And Boniface screamed out to halt. The Druidic priest determined to go forward with the sacrifice and started to plunge a knife into the heart of the young girl tied to the altar in front of the sacred grove. Boniface threw his body and blocked the blow, and ultimately, restraining the Druidic priest, he began to proclaim the good news of the gospel. No longer is it necessary to worship these trees and to sacrifice innocent blood, because innocent blood has been shed once and for all. Christ himself was nailed to a tree. So Boniface pulled out his long horseman's knife and he began to hack away at the great sacred grove. And he distributed the boughs of the trees to all of those who were gathered. And said, take these to your homes and adorn your homes with these, so that you may always remember the one true tree and never again come to worship these false trees. How did the Irish save civilization? Why do these stories continue to infect and ultimately enliven our thinking? I believe it's precisely because the Irish in that first generation laid hold of the glory of the transformation of the gospel in a way that no other people had fully up to that time. They incarnated it into their culture, and then they took it to the ends of the earth. And the story and the stories that ensued enliven our lives to this day. I love the story of those early Irish believers because they saved our books. I love the story of those early Irish believers because they were so courageous. I've taken largely as my own motto, the motto of Boniface, which was, run toward the roar, Wherever the battle is raging, that is where we are to run. Wherever the fight is the thickest, that is where we are to run. Wherever the risks are the greatest, that is where we are to run. I love that about those early Celtic believers. But most of all, I love those early Celtic believers because they understood time and eternity and wove both equally into the fabric of their culture. The fact that the Irish loved food and loved drink and loved family and loved the land, but had a lament for all of them, knowing that these were but temporal things and easily lost. That's an extraordinary balance. Christians through the ages have gone back and forth with what to do with this world, and for good reason. We are not to be of the world, that we're in the world. We're not to be possessed by the things of this world, and we're to guard against worldliness. And yet, God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son. To hold this all in balance is a marvel of faith and a marvel of grace. And it seemed that those early Celtic believers found the balance. And as Chesterton says, you can hear the songs of all of our hearts as you listen to the drones and the wails of Celtic pipes. I think the lessons for us are profound. So I think about the lesson of assimilation versus conversion. I see a missionary mandate. So I think about a day of growing darkness and illiteracy, if not illiteracy. I see a mandate for the preservation of words and of great rhetoric and of right thinking and of substantial books. In a day when we are given the opposing choice of either base worldliness or a kind of otherworldly separation. We see in the Celtic Church a glorious balance that is incarnational, where the good news is made alive in the midst of the world for the purpose of the holiness and the splendor of God. In this day and time, when it is very difficult to find a model for sacrificial mission, substantial cultural transformation, and engagement with the world around us, that early Celtic church provides us with a wonderful, wonderful model. One of my favorite of the Celtic heroes was Columba. He was born into Irish royalty just 2 generations after the time of Patrick. He was raised to taste all of the pleasures of nobility. And yet, because of a dramatic conversion as a young man, he and